Hey everybody. So I'm sure that many of you that have watched some of my other videos have seen this costume in the background and wondered what the heck it is. Well, this is an actual screen-used, screen-worn costume from the classic television show The Flying Nun from 1967 to 1970, I believe is when that series ran. It was a half-hour comedy show that starred Sally Field as the Flying Nun, Sister Bertrill. And it was just a half-hour comedy that was kind of a bit with an outlandish storyline where Sally Field's character, Sister Bertrill, could actually fly because of the coronet that she wore on her head, which acted as wings. And because she only weighed 90 pounds on windy days, she could actually fly. It was a totally bizarre show, but it was fun to watch. And, you know, Sally Field was cute, and I think that was probably the main appeal for the show. But anyway, so most of the time on the show, you saw them wearing a different nun's habit. So the main costumes that they wore looked like this. So they had their coronets on, and they had kind of the white or cream-colored outfits. And since Sister Bertrill here was a novice, she didn't have the blue kind of flap on there. And this is the Reverend Mother, and this is Sister Jacqueline. So those are the costumes that they normally wore. Now, in this particular episode from Season 3, I believe it was episode 10, the Mother General orders that they all wear these new habits. So they get these brand new habits to wear, and all the girls like it and they think it's great, until they realize that because the coronet on their head is built differently, Sister Bertrill can't fly in it. It doesn't have the same aerodynamics, and so unfortunately she can't fly. And so everybody becomes sad about the fact that she can't fly anymore. Now, in this scene, they decide to test out their theory about whether the coronet was aerodynamic or not. And so Sister Bertrill decides to try on her old coronet with the new outfit and then see if she can fly in it. So here she is taking off from the balcony where she always liked to take off, and she's now flying, and you can see that it turns out that, yes, it was the coronet that made the difference as to whether or not she could fly or not. So now the girls are all sad because Sister Bertrill can't fly anymore, and you know, the cool uniqueness of what her talents are lost now because of the new habits that they're wearing. So when Sister Bertrill comes to visit Carlos, her good friend who is the discotheque and casino owner, he finds out that she can't fly anymore and that she's really sad about it. So he decides to find a way to help her out. So it turns out his girlfriend here happens to be a dressmaker. So they come up with this ingenious plan to change the Mother General's mind. So all the nuns are now having a conversation here, and they're talking about the new habits and kind of trying to, in a slight way, try to say things that they didn't necessarily like about the new habits, so that the Mother General, which is this lady here, might change her mind. But they don't know that Carlos has a plan up his sleeve. So during the middle of the meeting, Carlos knocks on the door and says that he has more clothes to donate for their annual clothes drive. And so his girlfriend is holding all those clothes. And when they get all those clothes off of there, it suddenly reveals this dress, which suspiciously looks very similar to the new habits that the nuns are now wearing, including the coronet and the little V-shaped kind of design right here. And so, of course, that causes some concern and panic amongst the nuns. And it's pretty funny that they are all completely surprised to see that that dress looks very much like their new habits. So at this point, the Mother General now decides that they cannot have their habits look like a commercially available dress that's going to be available for something like $19.95 or something. It was hilarious, the price of it, since this was about 55 years ago. So they take a vote, and the Mother General there decides that they are going to go back to wearing their old habits, and thankfully Sister Bertrill can now go back to flying, even though the Mother General never knew that Sister Bertrill could actually fly. So going back to this costume now, so yes, this is an original costume that was actually worn in that episode. And I have the coronet of the original costume here just as a display. This is a replica coronet. It is not an actual coronet. And I think I'll make a short separate video about that. So this costume is an incredible piece to have because Flying Nun costumes, or anything really from that show, are exceedingly rare. I've only ever seen two Flying Nun costumes, and that is the cream-colored ones. ever show up at auction, and both of them sold for something crazy, like $15,000 or something like that. And one of them has actually changed hands 2 or 3 times, actually, since, you know, the original sale of it. But this one popped up during a Warner Brothers liquidation auction that I happened to get wind of. And when I was checking into it, I saw this costume on there, and I knew what it was the minute I saw it. And for whatever reason, they had it mislabeled as a woman's 1970s sci-fi outfit or something like that. It was kind of an odd description for it. So they obviously didn't know what it was. And so I bid on it, and then I had somebody else bidding against me. And then by the end of the auction, it was just the two of us bidding on it, and the other person never bid on it again. And lo and behold, I got this for, I think it was like $200 or $250. I mean, that was an absolute steal considering how rare this piece is, because like I said, there is hardly any Flying Nun stuff out there. So even though this isn't a key costume like you see through, you know, 99% of the show, it is still so cool that this was actually worn in that particular episode. Now, when I got this piece, it did come with the original Warner Brothers Costume Design Center hanger. This is the hanger that it was on. And it was really cool that it came with this. Also, what's interesting is that the costume had that kind of typical warehousey smell. I've had a couple of props that I've gotten before, or cloth kind of things like this, where it has this particular smell of a warehouse that, you know, that when they store these things at the studios. And I've actually been to the prop house in Paramount Studios, and it had that same smell. So it's kind of cool that that this had that smell as well. Now, looking closely at this costume, you can see that there is a bit of fading going on here on the shoulder. You can see there's a little bit of fading right there. Probably because it's been sitting on that hanger for the last, you know, 5 decades. I would imagine that, I mean, that show was, like I said, from 1967 to 1970. And so it's probably just been hanging there this whole time. What was really shocking about this is that it has not been altered at all. This is exactly the way you saw it. Most of the times when there is a costume like this, many studios will reuse these kinds of things. Like it's a dress. And so what they'll do is maybe they'll remove this little flap right here, this little epaulette, and they'll just take that off, maybe add some other decorative pieces on there, and by the time they're done, you can't tell that it was a dress that was used on the Flying Nun. It was for something else. But this dress has never been changed. It is exactly the way you saw it from that episode. It's just amazing that it's still like that. Now, here on the sleeve is an original tag that was on here. And I'm guessing that's maybe 38 bust, 32 waist, maybe? I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what those stand for. But this is the original tag that was on there, and I left it on. And so, yeah, I didn't want to mess with that. Also, what's interesting is whenever I get like a piece like this, it's always interesting to see how things are made. And so in here, you can see there's these little clips right here. So let me show you what those look like when they're unattached. So here on this sleeve, you can see there are little clips that are on here, and they clip into these little hoops. And I remember these things from when I was a kid, and it's kind of interesting to see them on here. But these are the kind of details that you would never see on the show. You know, these were always kind of tucked underneath like this, so you were never going to see these. And so whenever, you know, it's always cool to see one of these pieces in person, because now you get to kind of see, you know, how the thing was made. And so yeah, it's pretty interesting to notice that. Another interesting thing is this costume is heavy. It is really heavy. This material is kind of like a it's almost like a burlap material. It's kind of thick, and it's doesn't seem like it would breathe very well. It's very it's just heavy. I was really surprised when I picked up this thing, just how heavy it actually was. And I always thought that this little front piece here was a flap like they had on the original cream colored costumes, but it turns out this is actually all one piece. It's actually just sewed there, and they just made it look like a flap by the way it hangs like that, which I thought was very interesting. So when I saw that, because I thought this was going to be a separate piece right here, but it turns out it's actually all one. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. This is also, looks like it's made out of the same material. It's just a lighter color. But it's interesting that, you know, like I said, it has not been altered. It hasn't been taken off. It's sewed directly down this section here, and underneath here you can just see that it's just, you know, exactly the way it was. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I'll show you what the inside of it looks like. Real quick, before I show the inside, I just want to show you that there is a zipper that goes right down here. And so the way they sewed this, it's really nice. You don't see the zipper on here. And also what's interesting is, let me see if I can find one here. There's another one of these clips. Now this one you can see is missing right here, the little hoop. So the hoop came off over the years. But I think there's another one right up there. That's another clip that holds that together. So there was actually two. There's one near the neck and there's one near the bottom. And then this just comes down here. So yeah, that's the little zipper that you never get to see. So it turns out that there's actually two clips up here. I'd forgotten that there was another one on the top. And these have a little bit different kind of hoops, but it's got the same kind of hooks on this side. So on the inside here, you can see it's, just typical 1960s construction of this kind of stuff. It's very simple. You can see how it looks on the inside. Most costumes, I think, nowadays for shows are a little more refined in the way that they put them together, but this is very typical for the day that it was made, and it's just really kind of cool to see that. On the inside here, now I don't know if you can see this, but I was really shocked to see this piece here and this one on this side. So what these are is they are sweat pads. These are sweat pads because, like I had mentioned, this is heavy. It's a heavy costume, and they probably didn't breathe very well, and those poor girls were probably sweating in these costumes. And granted, the show was only for one episode. This costume was only used for one episode, but I think Sally Field said that they spent 5 days filming each episode, and so I was really surprised to see that they actually had this sweat pad that was inside here, and I thought that was pretty cool. I don't think there's anything in it. It's just an extra layer of cloth to soak up any sweat that might be in there, and they look like they're safety pinned on here. Those are the original safety pads, safety pins and sweat pads that are in there. I couldn't believe that. I think that is so cool. It's these kinds of surprises when you get to see this stuff in person that you realize, wow, that is so cool. I never knew that was in there. So I found that really interesting that they had those inside there like that. Now on the bottom here, you can see how this was constructed as well. It's just, once again, very simple stitching, and it's got kind of this light colored little bit right there, which is kind of cool. But yeah, so anyway, in looking at this, now there's no tag on the neck. Usually on costumes like this, on the inside of the back of the neck here, they'll have a tag that usually has the name of the actress that wore it. This one does not have a tag, and there's two possible reasons for that. Number one is because this was only used in one episode, it's quite possible that they decided not to put a tag on it, because they probably only made one per actress. I mean, since it was only a 5-day shoot, it's not like they were probably going to make doubles of these. Or it's possible that it was one of the extras on the show, but there's only 2 extras that ever show up in the episode. So in this scene in the episode where everybody's around the dinner table and everybody's kind of sad to find out that Sister Bertrill can't fly anymore, you'll see these 2 ladies here with their backs to us right there. So it's very possible that that dress is one of these ladies' outfits, and that's why it doesn't have a name on it. But I don't know, in looking at the measurements and the way that costume is cut and fit, these girls look like they have kind of wider shoulders, and I don't know, I just don't think it's theirs. The person who I think it belongs to is Marge Redmond. So Marge Redmond, as I mentioned, played Sister Jacqueline right here, who sadly just passed away a few months ago, I found out, so I was really sad to hear about that. So Sally Field is the only one that's left alive from the show. Everybody has sadly passed away. But I am under the suspicion that it might be Marge Redmond's dress. So the reason I think it may be Marge's is because you'll notice that she's one of the tallest ladies here. That dress obviously belonged to a tall actress. She's also quite slender, and so that dress has got a very narrow waist area, and so I'm guessing it's hers. I mean, that I have studied that thing enough times to almost be 95% sure that it probably belongs to Marge here, because I know Sally Field, she's only 5'4", I believe. She's a relatively short girl, and I can't remember the name of this actress who played Sister Anna, but she looks like she might even be a little shorter than Sally, and I know that dress isn't hers because I'm about 5'6" or 5'7", so when I stand next to that dress, that person was taller, and so I think that it might be Marge's. These 2 ladies here were a little bit, I would say, not to be rude, but they were a little bit thicker as far as their body style goes compared to Marge, because Marge is, she's just a tall, slender lady. So they just had a different build. So one thing about this costume is that when I got it, unfortunately, it does not come, or did not come, with the cornet, the headpiece, and I didn't see any of the cornets show up at the auction. I can't remember now. I've had this for quite a few years, and I can't remember if I was talking to somebody that was part of the auction or what, but I think I had mentioned to that person that this dress came from the Flying Nun, because they didn't seem to know, since they had listed it incorrectly. In fact, they had a lot of odd things in that auction, including a couple of Klingon costumes. I don't know how they got a hold of those. That's a Paramount property, but who knows? And it makes sense that Warner Brothers had this costume because the Flying Nun, I Dream of Jeannie, Bewitched, Partridge Family, shows like that were all filmed through the Screen Gems production company, and Screen Gems was later taken over or bought out by Warner Brothers, so Warner Brothers now owns all of that. And so, it makes sense that they got this particular dress. But yeah, so, as far as like getting the cornet piece, I don't know what happened to it. The person that I was talking to said that they had another one of these dresses, which I thought, wow. And I was hoping to get that one too, but I think since they had found out that this was actually from the Flying Nun, that puts it in a whole different ballpark. And so I think they knew they screwed up by selling a piece like this for such a low price from such a classic TV show. I never did see that other costume show up at auction, or any other costume from the Flying Nun after that, which is, like I said, for some reason it's just very elusive to get that. When you watch that show, there had to have been at least, God, maybe 20 or 30 of those costumes made. So where are they? Are they still sitting in the Warner Brothers warehouse where this was? It would be interesting. And, only 2 ever got out, like I mentioned, at a previous auction. So anyhow, but so I wanted to mention, I was watching an interview with Sally Field, who, did the show as Sister Bertrill. And she was talking about how she honestly did not want to do this show. She was she had just gotten done filming Gidget, and that show only ran for 1 year. And then after that, she was just going to take a break. And then they offered her the part of Sister Bertrill of the Flying Nun, and she didn't want to do it. She just absolutely did not want to do the show. And so one day she was with her stepdad, and her stepdad said, you may want to take that job because you may not get offered anything else. And she got scared. She got kind of worried about it. So she reluctantly called the producer of The Flying Nun, and they had already started filming the pilot with a different actress playing the Sister Bertrill part. I can't remember the name of that actress. It was Ronnie somebody. But it turned out that the producers weren't too happy with that actress because the chemistry wasn't working out. So they were happy to have Sally Field on the show. But the whole time Sally was saying yes, she'd do the show, she was just like, she was like, no. She was yelling no in her head because she didn't want to do it. Well, the show ended up lasting 3 years, and it ended up being a huge hit. And, so she at least, got her name out there, and I'm sure she's happy to have at least been a part of that. But she said the show was, everybody on the show was nice, super nice. The actresses were really great. And Madeline Sherwood, who played the Reverend Mother. So this is Madeline Sherwood here in the middle. She actually was, she had been doing shows, and she was, an experienced actress. For Sally, this was only her second TV show, and so she was kind of, still a little new at everything. But Madeline Sherwood was really nice, took Sally under her wing, and really helped her out during the show, and suggested she go to the actor's studio or the actor's workshop. And she would do that at night while she did The Flying Nun during the day. And she said that ended up being a huge help. But so as the show went on, it started becoming a grind, because most of these shows are, and especially when you're the main star of the show like Sally was, you're in every scene. So by the 3rd season, she said that she was just getting really tired. She there was a director. They had different directors for every show. And this one director kept, like grabbing her from the shoulders and moving her over here and said, okay, now you're going to move over here and you'll say this, this, and this. And then he grabs Sally again and moves her over here and says, now you'll move back over here and then you'll say this and this. And Sally just got really upset. And she's like, stop, just don't touch me anymore. She's like, just stop because he was moving her around like a prop, and I guess the other girls thought that was, they kind of cheered her on because she was kind of standing up for herself for the first time. And then in the third season, she kind of had a breakdown. They were doing some scene, and she just kind of lost it. She just started crying, and she just kept saying she wanted to go home with her head in her hands. And Madeline Sherwood, she goes, "Get her a car. She is not working for the rest of the day." And so they took Sally home, and they managed to shoot around her through the rest of the for the rest of the episode. And you can kind of tell when that happens if you're watching the third season episodes, because there's an episode where Sally only shows up at the very beginning of the episode and the very end of the episode, and she's sick in the hospital, and throughout the middle of the episode she's not in it, and then in the next episode she's not in it at all. And so they must have just given her a couple of weeks to just kind of relax. I'm just noticing that is episode 10 from the third season. So anyway, yeah, so it was interesting, and she talks about all kinds of other crazy stuff. So going back to the dress now, so she was talking about, how did they make her fly? And she says, "How did they make me fly?" She goes, she said, "By every trick in the book." And so they would put her on wires. So underneath the hip area here, she had a harness that she would wear where the wires would attach to the side, like in the back section on the side back here. And so and one of these dresses would have to have had holes cut into it for the wires, which that was another thing when I got this costume. I thought maybe this is the flying dress, but it's not. At least as far as I can tell, there's no holes in it for the wires to come out of. Anyway, she was talking about how that they didn't even have the budget to make her a new harness. That harness was made for Mary Martin, who is the mother of Larry Hagman from My Dream of Jeannie, and Mary Martin played Peter Pan, and so they just reused her flying harness. And so because of that, it probably didn't fit very good. She said that harness was incredibly painful to wear, and especially when she's in it for an hour, being suspended by wire. She said that blood would just stop, going to her legs and lower extremities, poor girl. And then she also talked about in the first season, they didn't even have the budget for a stunt person. And so in the first season, Sally is doing all those flying scenes, which just boggles my mind. She said she was on a 50-foot crane, being suspended by wires, being flown around, and there were times where the crane operator would bump her up against the building, and he'd smash her up against there. And she said that, even in her wildest dreams today, if she wanted to do a stunt like that, they would never let her do that because of liability and, accidents and stuff like that. They wouldn't want anything to happen to her. And here she is doing these crazy, stunts on a 50-foot crane. And then she said they also came up with other ways to make her fly. In the pilot episode, you can see when she first learns that she can fly, she's actually laying on a board, and the board is kind of like a teeter-totter where they're just kind of tipping it up and down like this. Well, if you look closely, you can actually see the board that she's lying on, and she said they didn't even have the decency to paint it, white to match the outfit, which I thought was pretty hilarious. And then she said there was another device that they used where it's kind of like a platform that looks like this, and then when it raises up, this part stays flat right here. So she steps on the flat part, and when they raise it up, she stays flat, and then they just film her from the knees up, and that way you don't see what she's stepping on. But she said you had to be, right on the mark when you step on that because, you don't want to fall off. So she had to make sure that she, wasn't staring at it when she walks up to it. You have to make it look natural. And then she'd step on it, and then they'd raise her up. And she said that was her favorite one because it didn't require any kind of harnesses or any other crazy kind of stuff. She could just step on it, act like she's taking off, and then come back down and step off. And so, so she talked about all of that. So anyway, it was a pretty interesting interview. I think you can actually find it here on YouTube. Just look up Sally Field Flying Nun interview, and you'll see it. I think it's an 18-minute long interview, but it's on the first season DVDs too. But it was very interesting because I've never really heard Sally Field talk that much about it. She said she just really did not like doing the show, and it became she became kind of the laughing stock in Hollywood. And I feel bad for her because, she said that they became the Flying Sally jokes and not the Flying Nun jokes. There were jokes about it on The Tonight Show and everything else, and she just kind of felt like she was the butt of many of those kinds of jokes. And it's too bad that that happened because she was so good on the show. She was just excellent on there, and she was just, this cute little girl, and I think everybody, loved Sally Field on there. And look at what an amazing actress she turned out to be now, and when she went on to do all these other movies. So Anyway, so that is the story behind this dress and this costume, and I'm just really glad to have this piece because it is such a rare piece, and thank goodness I managed to get it through the fluke of somebody's mistake on the Warner Brothers auction. And I don't know whatever happened to the other one. It never came up for auction that I know of, and sadly, none of the other costumes have ever shown up except for those two that I've seen pop up at different auctions. But it would be interesting to know, what they're ever going to do with those. They probably should just sell them and make some money on them. Why not? There's going to be a lot of fans from the Flying Nun that wanted it. An old classic TV comedy that we grew up watching. All right, well, that's the history of this costume. I hope you enjoyed all this little bits of information and got to see what this looks like up close. And if you did like it, please like and subscribe if you'd like. And thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode. Thank you again, and have a good one.